Good afternoon. Good afternoon and welcome to our Link and Learn, Quality or Quantity, Crafting a Personal Networking Strategy that Works for You, hosted on behalf of the KU Graduate Certificate in Professional Workplace Communication. Just a couple of sort of housekeeping items before we get started. Generally, when folks log into our webinar, the first thing you see is my beautiful face in large proportions. So if you hover over the image, you can minimize it and push it to the side of your screen so that way you can see the entire slide. And then also, I have a colleague here with me, Dr. Angie Pastoric, who also works in our Workplace Professional Communication Graduate Certificate Program. And she's going to be monitoring the chat function and the Q&A function, which are at the bottom of your screen. So if you have any questions or any technical difficulties, please do bring those to our attention, and we'll try to monitor that as we go along. And then finally, at the end of the session today, there'll be a quick 2-question survey that we'd just like to ask to get some insight into your own experience for today. I am Dr. Angelogist, and I have a dual appointment at the KU Edwards campus in Overland Park, as well as the KU Lawrence campus in the main campus, and I teach courses in our graduate certificate program as well as in our undergraduate, master's, and doctoral programs, emphasizing in organizational communication. So my research interests look at issues of social class and social mobility, particularly in the context of organizations. I'm also fascinated with the idea of social identity as well as organizational culture and power. And my dissertation research looked at job search communication. Networking is a huge part of that, and so that's the topic I've decided to present on today. So ultimately, I want you to think of networking as really a strategic communication skill. And it's something that we can use to develop our own career resources. So our objectives for the day are to understand the strengths of networking relationships, to think about personal networking objectives for our own career trajectories, and to think about strategies for networking effectively, and then to develop a systematic strategy for both interpersonal and online social networking in the professional context. And then finally, to learn how to identify local networking opportunities. And I'm going to be sharing several resources with you so that you can sort of continue on learning about this topic if you're so interested. So to kick off, I have some questions, and these are polling questions. So they will populate on your screen, and you'll be able to select multiple choice answers. So the 2 questions I have for you today are: 1, when you think of networking, what comes to mind first? And the options are to meet new people, awkward conversation, asking for help, or helping people. And then the second would be, what makes you most uncomfortable about networking? Is it this idea of creating a superficial relationship, maybe getting out of your comfort zone, being perceived as bothersome or worrisome to people? People might think that you're soliciting them for something, or just not knowing what to say, not being good with small talk. So we'll give you just a few moments. We've got 20 people logged on to today's Link and Learn, and then we'll populate the results so that we can learn a little bit about our own perceptions of networking. Okay. So we'll start with the first question. So when you think of networking, what comes to mind first? Overwhelmingly, sort of the first option is meeting new people. Then the second we had, and there were 12 out of 20 people that said that. And then awkward conversation and asking for help. And nobody said helping people, which is really interesting because we're going to talk about that today as sort of one of the core tenets of effective networking. For the second poll question, when did you think, or sorry, what makes you most uncomfortable about networking? You'll have a few moments just to answer that question. You can pick multiple answers if there are 2 or 3 answers that you're interested in. Almost there. We've got 17 out of 20 folks that have voted. Our results here really sort of evenly balanced. So the top result was being perceived as bothersome, but close behind that, which netted in at a tie, were creating a superficial relationship and getting out of my comfort zone. And then following that is not knowing what to say. Networking is one of these things that most people realize is like a necessary evil, right? They know that there are benefits to networking, and we hear lots of stories and can tell stories about people who've benefited from it. But for most of us, it's something that is somewhat unnerving and uncomfortable. So let's first define what networking is, and then we'll dive into some strategies on how to really make networking less uncomfortable and more effective in terms of creating our own personal strategy. All right, so here's a working definition of what networking is. It's strategically communicating with others to establish and maintain long-term, meaningful professional relationships. And this is not something that you should do only when you're looking for a job. Networking is something that we can incorporate into our day-to-day communication, both internally for our organization as well as externally. So we'll talk a little bit more about the differences between internal and external networking, but I really want you to think about these as meaningful relationships, not simply a one-way street where I'm trying to get somebody to help me find a new gig, but rather something that can be mutually beneficial for people over time. Think of workplace relationships and networking relationships as opportunistic resources that we can leverage in order to help boost our own personal career trajectory and the career trajectories of others. So external networking is the thing that people think of most commonly. The purpose here is to connect with people who have a mutual interest in developing business relationships and assisting others. And so here, this is where we're stepping outside our organization. Maybe you're at a happy hour or an event, and you realize that someone who is at the same event, you have overlapping interests, right? And so here we try to create this conversation, this bond, and perhaps we create sort of a follow-up conversation after that where we connect with people. A couple of tips with external networking. One, don't cut people out of the process, right? In order to develop a meaningful relationship, we really have to understand who people are, what they're about, and what their goals are. And so we can't think of this as sort of a get-rich-quick scheme. This has to be a crock pot and not a microwave, right? So relationships marinate over time, and over that time, then you'll understand how you can be helpful to people as well as how people can be helpful to you. I like this metaphor that networks should be a lake, not a river, right? They should be vast and deep, not wide and shallow. So when we create these relationships, they shouldn't be sort of superficial relationships. We should really take sort of a genuine interest in others and invite them to take a genuine interest in us. Know that networking can be really easy using technology. We can sort of stockpile these different connections, but you ultimately have to get to the root of a person, right? So don't just think of it as the number of connections you might have on LinkedIn, which we'll talk about later in this session. Really think about how those connections can be formed at a deeper level. When we talk about internal networking, a lot of people sort of overlook this aspect of networking as something that can effectively bolster their own career and the careers of others. So look outside your immediate daily grind, right? So you're in the work, you have your sort of 5 or 6 people that you contact on a regular basis, but think about how you can connect with people outside of that circle to create value not only for yourself, but for other folks and for your company. So if you work to develop relationships with leaders in your companies, that can start with your supervisor, right? So make a list of people that you'd like to know better, and then ask your supervisor or other folks in the organization to make those introductions. Also, set up coffee dates, right? Set up lunch dates. Set up time just to get to know people, understanding what their positions are, what their needs are. And then if you can connect on that, you might collaborate with them more effectively down the line. Another way to network is to sort of congratulate and talk up other people's accomplishments, right? And so one perception of internal networking is that it's this idea of sucking up or brown-nosing or playing politics, but we really have to change our mindset. We have to think about internal networking as a way to better effectively manage people and our work lives. So I remember working in the advertising industry. Before earning my doctorate, I worked at an agency, and we worked in cross-functional teams. So many of our departments, so my account executive department would work with the production department, would work with the photography department, would work with creatives, all to produce the end campaign. And I realized that as a person who had touch points in different departments, if I could understand their frustrations as an employee, their own job duties and roles and responsibilities, that I would be more effective at my job. I could circumvent some of the frustrations they were experiencing when interacting with people in my role. And my ability to do that created long-lasting relationships that sometimes helped create advantages. So if I, for example, was behind schedule and missed my deadline, because I had already developed that relationship, I was able to push my project through a little bit quicker because people understood that I had taken a vested interest in them. So when we talk about networking today, I want you to think about it both internally and externally. So what does networking look like? It looks like connecting with people, get involved in your community. We can network while volunteering with folks, while participating in community events. It looks like building relationships, advancing careers, and leveraging those resources. It's seeing people as something worthy of investment and seeing yourself as something that people can invest in. And so think about the ways in which networking can positively impact your own social mobility and socioeconomic status, right? So this is a way that we can promote upward mobility in our lives. Granovetter developed this theory called the strength of weak ties. And he published an article in 1973 in the American Journal of Sociology, where he talked about our connections. And really, he defined this idea of strong ties and weak ties. Strong ties are people that we know intimately and that know us fairly well. These are our closest friends, maybe our closest coworkers, our neighbors. They're family, right? These are the people who are in our day-to-day circle, in our day-to-day lives. The interesting fact about strong ties are that these are the people we're most comfortable going to network. When we need a new job, we quickly tell our family members or our closest friends. But these are also the people that can't invite any new opportunity because our circles and spheres overlap so much. So when we think about our strong ties, these are people that know the same job contacts, opportunities, and social connections that we already have. And so they're not effective in terms of networking. Granovetter's research shows that through weak ties, we can actually reach out and expand our network into other people's networks. And by doing that, we can exponentially increase the number of opportunities that we're aware of, the number of people who know that we are interested in finding a job or seeking a new career or promotion or learning a new skill. And the sweet spot is really 3 degrees removed from your own social circle. So it's not the person that you know, it's the person that they know and the person that that person knows, right? So you have to be 2 or 3 degrees out. I came across this theory when I was doing my dissertation research on white-collar unemployment. And I went to a networking group to interview someone who was leading an entrepreneurship group. And so he told me that I could interview him after that meeting and invited me to attend the meeting, the networking club, and then interview him afterwards. So I met this gentleman at a fancy athletic club in a large metropolitan Midwestern city. And then when I pulled up, I realized immediately that my Toyota Corolla did not fit in the same socioeconomic category as the other luxury cars that were in the parking lot. So I walked in and I told the woman at the front desk that I was looking for this particular networking club. And she looked up the location and she escorted me to the room. So we passed nice racquetball courses, an indoor pool. We passed an indoor volleyball court and went all the way back to a banquet dining hall with white tablecloths. And we went through that banquet dining hall all the way back to private meeting rooms. And she looked in the room and she saw a room of middle-aged white men who were enjoying a meal together. And she looked at me and she looked at them and she looked at me and she looked at them and she said, "Are you sure this is where you're supposed to be?" And I peeked in and I saw my contacts and I waved at him and he said, "Come on in." And she was like, "Okay." So this networking club was by invitation only. And so that's something that's really specific and important to note in this particular category. So they invited folks that had startup entrepreneurships to present their business models to the group of gentlemen who were part of this club. And then those business entrepreneurships asked for connections. So for example, the first person who presented was a consultant for folks that own their own practices. So this consultant provided basically HR services to folks that had their private doctor's offices or lawyer practices. And then he extended sort of his services to support their own. And so at the end of his presentation, the gentleman in the room pulled out their smartphone and gave them the number of their dentist, their doctors, and their lawyers, and said, call them, they owe me a favor, and see, what types of business services you can provide. And I realized then that networking in that moment was very different than the sort of happy hour event that I had been previously thinking about, or the quick exchange of business cards that happens in passing. This was a situation that was going to transform this entrepreneur's business. Contact information for people that could become long-term loyal customers. And he was able to say, this person told me to call you. Would you please sit down and listen to my business proposal? The second entrepreneur then presented. And during that entrepreneur, he asked at the end of it if he could bring his son, which I realized then that this opportunity was going to transform potentially a generation, right? So they were inviting in outside people. And here they were exponentially increasing the number of weak ties that they were making in a way that could positively impact their business. So when someone says, I know a guy who knows a guy who knows a guy, really take that to heart and understand that there is power behind those connections. So I propose to you that there are 5 steps to strategically networking. The first is to identify what are your networking needs, right? How can networking as a strategic communication skill help you? What is it that you need to learn? What is it that you need to get involved in? What is it that you're just really interested in and would like to learn more about? So if you articulate those and literally write them down for yourselves, then you can construct specific networking objectives. So you can identify how networking can start to open the doors to some of these potential opportunities. Then you should conduct research on your specific geographic area and potential connections in that area. Develop a written networking plan, and then map a timeline onto that networking plan. So for myself, this is my 2nd year as a professor at KU, and I needed to get my name out there. I needed to develop my own reputation as a scholar in the area who studies issues of unemployment and job searching. So I've been very intentional about the spaces and places that I've put myself in so that I can make those connections. I have gone to job fairs. I have networked with people who work in local nonprofit organizations that help the unemployed. And I have intentionally sort of set out those meetings on basically a month-to-month basis to make sure that I am making the connections that I need to push my own research agenda, as well as to help local organizations fulfill their objectives as well. Another way that we can begin to more intentionally control our networking is to create and track our networking contacts. And you can do that by developing a database. So your database should be in a format that is easy to access and edit, easy to retrieve, and easy to search. So my networking contacts database simply exists in an Excel spreadsheet where I would list people's information, contact information, and then personal details that can help me follow up with them. You can start this networking contacts database by listing the people that you currently know, adding new contacts as you meet them, and then listing people that you would like to know, which would facilitate introductions from the folks that are already in your database. You can also do this by listing target companies of interest. So for example, I'm really interested in meeting people who work in the local United Way office. So if I have that target company and I can intentionally ask people, do you know people who work for United Way in the area? Being specific that way will help facilitate those introductions. And then you can revisit or analyze your database to figure out who are the brokers, who are the spokes in the middle of the wheel that connect you with all different types of people, because they become sort of critical components in your networking database. This is an example of what a networking database might look like. And this is a very simplified version, but it'll give you an idea in particular of the types of information that you can track. And you can always edit this and update it as people change careers or jobs. When you're networking, it's important that you are present, right? So whether this is internal networking or external, you have to be there in the moment making connections with people. So introduce yourself, and when you introduce yourself, you can use this notion of an elevator pitch, right? So know who you are, be able to succinctly say that, what you can do for other people, and then what you need other people to do for you. The elevator pitch is named that way because it's supposed to be the length of an elevator ride, right? If you were in the elevator with the ideal networking connection, how could you succinctly put forth this message in a way that would be impactful, hard-hitting, as well as short and concise? And then you obtain the same information from other people, right? Exchange contact information every time you network, and then propose a future meeting. So if at the end of the conversation you say, we should get coffee sometime, or we should have lunch or attend a happy hour, then when you actually invite that person later on, it doesn't seem like that invitation has come out of thin air, right? You've already sort of proposed that as part of your connection. And I admire when people are able to do this well, right? It's something that will take practice, but definitely sit down, write down the things about yourself that could be part of an elevator pitch, practice that elevator pitch in different formats, like 30 or 60 seconds. And then when you're in that social setting, it'll sort of roll off the tongue naturally. Here are some guidelines when you have networking meetings. Again, strategically planned conversation. Most haphazard networking happens on the fly, right? It's not planned, and we haven't taken the time to think about what it is that we need from networking. So if you are intentional and purposeful about the way that you network, then you can have a strategically planned conversation. Share your networking objectives with others, and make sure that you're securing your own plans for additional introductions. Ask people to make that introduction for you to bridge that gap with new opportunities. Consider bringing a personal executive summary. And I particularly propose this for folks that are on the job market. So you can bring a one-page sheet that outlines who you are, what your strengths are, and then who are the target companies or individuals that you would like to meet. And that one-page sheet can be a leave behind after you've had coffee or lunch with someone. This becomes an informative way for them to bridge an introduction, right? So if you've had a coffee networking date with someone and they have this personal executive summary of you and your skill sets, when they sit down to write that email to introduce you to the person you've been dying to meet, then they can write an informative email. That email can say, I met and had coffee with Angela Gist. She works at KU. She's really passionate and interested in studying, and she's of unemployment and social class. And I really thought that you two would have a lot in common, right? So having those tangible details is much more compelling in an email introduction than if somebody said, I had coffee with this person and they seemed great. I think you two should meet, right? So otherwise, that executive summary provides content and detail for the overall networking meeting. And then finally, at the end of every networking meeting, you should offer your own help and support to the other person. There are a lot of skill sets that we have that we don't realize are valuable outside the workplace and to other people. So offering those up shows goodwill and trustworthiness in the networking conversation. I'd like to share with you a couple of resources that have helped folks learn how to network more effectively. So one that I'd like to recommend is a website called Coffee Lunch Coffee. And there's also a textbook. It's developed by Alana Mueller. She is the president of Kauffman Fast Track. And Alana Mueller has a master's degree in business administration from the University of Chicago. And she was the recipient of the Herman Family Fellowship for Women in Entrepreneurship. She also won the 2012 Influential Women by Kansas City Business Magazine. So she's located here in the area, and I definitely love to promote local folks. She also has this great book, a practical field guide for master networking called Coffee Lunch Coffee. So definitely check that out as a resource if you're interested. When you go to this website, you can also download lots of networking tasks and workshops. So she has a spreadsheet that you can download to start your networking database. She also has sample elevator pitches that you can learn to follow and mimic your own, and different strategies, again, to develop and expand your own personal network. A second resource I'd like to share is a website called peopleequation.com. And in particular, I'm recommending a blog by Jennifer V. Miller. Jennifer Miller also is a writer for Forbes, and she is the managing partner of SkillSource, which is an organizational development consultancy that helps in specializing leaders, teams, and professionals. And so she has a number of different blogs on networking. This one that I'm featuring here asks, what is your networking style? Where she overviews 4 different networking styles. And she learns and teaches people about networking and workplace dynamics through her blog. The third I would like to recommend is a website called linkedwise.com. LinkedWise is a site that's hosted by Kathy Bernard. Kathy Bernard is a personal connection of mine, and she has taught me everything I know about LinkedIn. She's a career coach in the metropolitan St. Louis area. and she is amazing. And so all of the details that I'll share with you today about LinkedIn, I've learned from her, and she told me that I could share with you so long as I gave her a shout out. So here is Kathy Bernard's citation and shout out. Her website is amazing, and I've definitely even brought her into my classroom to teach my students about LinkedIn. The final is a website called The Skim. So The Skim is basically a daily email newsletter that gives you the highlights in global and national news. It is by far one of my lifelines. So many times I don't have the time to sort of dive into the news, but I still feel it's necessary for me to be informed. And when you're networking with people, it's really also important for you to be informed. So this is a way for you to get the highlights and be knowledgeable about what's going on in the world before you jump out there and have those networking conversations. All right. So that's my final networking resource for you today. So I'd like to know from your own perspective, where do you network, right? Where do you often find yourself networking with people? So this is a polling question, and there will be 4 options. So option number 1 is, do you find yourself networking at work-related events, such as a work-related happy hour or conference? Maybe non-work related events, perhaps strictly online, or do you network anytime, any place? Go ahead and place your votes now. A few more seconds. We've got 15 of 22 people who have voted. Yeah. Okay, so we'll go ahead and stop the polling. The results are anytime, any place, and I'm happy to see that that is the result. We should be networking in lots of different places. And one of the places that we should network is online, and no one selected online. So the next half of our presentation is going to focus on LinkedIn and different networking events. So here in the Kansas City metro area, and that's where I focus just because that's where I'm broadcasting from, there are lots of different places for you to network. So many of the chambers of commerce for various cities and townships have networking events that they host on a regular basis. There's also the Kansas City Job Fair, which they host in both the spring and the fall, and they have over 60 different employers attend every season. And then there are different meetup groups that you can go to. So if you go to meetup.com, they will have specific ones for your geographic location. And there are different ones for different industries, as well as for particular demographic groups as well. Professional online social networking is critical, and it helps us in so many different ways. It can help you research key people at top companies. It can also help you reconnect with past business colleagues. It can help you generate business or career opportunities, researching the right people in the right places, for example. It will help you build business relationships with influential people or industry thought leaders. It can increase your own face-to-face or interpersonal networking effectiveness. It can help you establish a strong brand or marketing presence. It can also transcend time and space. So when you're online networking, you can network with people in all different parts of the world. And that networking can continue to happen even when you're not online, because your profile is working for you while you're not logged on. So why use LinkedIn? I'm focusing on LinkedIn for a number of reasons. Number 1, 93% of recruiters use LinkedIn to find candidates. This is the world's largest professional network. It exists, it has more than 235 million members in over 200 countries, and 40% of those users are in the United States. But it has an exclusively business focus. So this is not your Twitter or your Facebook that has somewhat of a professional edge or a personal edge to it. LinkedIn is strictly professional. It's powerful because you can stand out from your competition, you can build valuable relationships using LinkedIn, you can apply for jobs, you can interact with people, and you can enlist help from influential folks in your own industry. It can also help you research hiring companies. So there's a number of different reasons why LinkedIn is a compelling space for people to be present in from a professional standpoint. So today we're going to talk about how to establish a strong profile. So we'll look at a profile image, the headline and summary, and then recommendations, skill sets, and different add-ons that you can have in your profile. I see a question in the Q&A section. So we'll start with why a profile picture. Profiles with pictures are viewed 7 times more than profiles without pictures. They also make 6 times more connections. So it's important that you have a professional headshot. You should avoid bizarre and busy backgrounds, and pictures should be in the PNG, JPEG, or GIF format, and they should be about 4 megabytes. So I have some pictures down here of pictures that would be acceptable for a LinkedIn profile. On the next slide, I'd like to share with you some images that would be unacceptable. And I'm gonna ask you to use the chat function in Zoom to highlight and tell me, what do you think is wrong with these images? And I'll answer the question that was seen. What was the LinkedWise website? It's just linkedwise.com. And you couldn't access it. I will send that out at the end. I'll send a link, a URL out to LinkedWise. But if you Google Kathy Bernard, or you can find her on LinkedIn as well, then you should be able to get to her website. That's a great question. Then I can see the chat. Okay, oh yeah. What's wrong with these pictures? Unbusinesslike, yes, I agree. They're not clear, they have distractions, poor attire, they're blurry, and too busy of a background or bad lighting. Absolutely, there's lots of issues with these pictures, right? Too dark, too personal. So if you take, for example, the top left-hand picture, this person is in a cap and gown, which definitely connotes student, right? So it sends that image. And here, this is a professional space, so you don't want to have this image of being a student, even a graduate. Also, that image is too small. It doesn't fill the space. The top middle picture has too busy of a background. There's bananas behind him and various bookshelves on this whiteboard, and he's also not in professional attire. The picture on the top right has definitely a Christmas theme to it and is showing a little too much skin for a professional headshot as well. The picture on the bottom left is overexposed, right? The color and contrast is off. And the bottom right is taken in sort of a professional context. It looks like this person may have been at a conference, but it's not a clear headshot, so we can't see the face clearly. And it looks a little sort of messy or disheveled, having the lanyard over the clothing. So these are definitely not your most ideal pictures as well. Okay. So when we start to look at different features of the LinkedIn profile, there are a number of different sections, and I'd like to communicate to you what are the character counts for those sections. So the first is your headline. The headline appears right beneath your name, and there are 120 characters that appear in that section. Next is your summary, which you see I have mine here. Your summary has 2,000 characters, and you should really use those characters to your advantage, right? So think about what types of specialties, expertise can you highlight. Mine is in paragraph format, and I primarily do that because I'm an academic, but I encourage that folks actually use bullet points, right? Use this to highlight sort of your key strengths and added value in an organization. Then we have the position title. So the position title shows later on in your profile when we talk about specific work experiences, and that has 100 characters. And the position description can have up to 2,000 characters. And then finally, in the interest section, you can have up to 1,000 characters. So it's important that you realize this just so that you can see sort of how much restriction there is on the content that you add to your profile. Headline strategies are really critical. So the way that recruiters find candidates online is by searching key terms. And you want the key terms that you would like to be found for. A lot of people will use adjectives in their headlines, but that should actually be avoided. So no one is searching the word excellent or dedicated when they're looking for a job candidate, right? They're looking for specific titles, right? Specific criteria. So you want to have, for example, IT recruiter or operations recruiter, not a proven IT recruiter. Those simply waste characters and you're not populating in a search for something like proven and adjective. Also, you should avoid splitting titles. So don't add words such as and or. Instead, use a pipe, and a pipe can be found, this is the symbol that exists between the two titles here, IT recruiter and operations recruiter. And it's on your keyboard above the /. So if you hit shift and then /, then you should be able to find the pipe. And that basically populates it with multiple different keywords that you could easily be found for. So below the text on this slide, I have examples of good headlines. So here, doctoral student, business development, technology, marketer, innovator, telematics, publisher, copywriter. These things that you would like to be located and identified as. For my students who haven't achieved these job titles yet, many times I will tell them to add the one word aspiring so that they're not being sort of misleading, but that way they still populate when they put various job titles in their headline. So my headline says, Organizational Communication Scholar, Assistant Professor, University of Kansas, and Qualitative Researcher. These are the types of things that I would like to be identified as if someone was searching for someone with my area of expertise. You can also, and should also, customize your web profile. So LinkedIn will assign you a generic randomized code full of letters and numbers that can locate your specific profile. But you can customize this. And so if you go under the edit mode in your profile, you'll see this option to customize your own LinkedIn. And mine simply says linkedin.com/Angela Gist, right? So it's just my name. But I can put that URL on my business card, in my email signature, on my resume, or in a cover letter. So that way, when I have those other documents out there working for me, they're immediately connected to my digital presence on LinkedIn. This is what it looks like when you add that specific URL. So you would type in what you want and it'll tell you if that URL has been taken already, and then you hit save. Think about your profile accessibility as well. And again, this will depend on what your networking objectives are. So you can make your profile largely accessible to major search engines, and you can decide which elements of your profile are visible to everyone or no one. So when I was on the job market, I literally had every single box checked because I wanted my profile to be highly visible. Instead, now that I'm not on the job market, I simply have my headline and summary visible so that someone would want to know what type of expertise do I have, and then they could connect with me personally through a message. But you can strategically control what information is public in order to meet those objectives, and you should take advantage of that feature on LinkedIn. The summary section is also critical. And again, here you can list your specialties, use keywords found in the job descriptions that you would like to be connected with. You can also upload digital assets such as your resume, a presentation, work samples, or web links. I've since then added a connection to my own personal website, which has more details about my own scholarship. And so all of these types of things can, again, make your expertise and skill set jump off of the digital page. So make sure that you're using the summary section effectively. A lot of people skip over this section, but it is at the top of your profile, and it is the first thing that people will see beneath your picture and your headline. So you want to make sure that you're using this space effectively. Highlight things later on in your profile that people might find compelling and want to scroll down to read. When you add digital assets to your profile, you would use this function. So particularly, you would go to LinkedIn under the edit section and then find this rectangle with a plus sign where it says click to add a video, image, document, or presentation. And then you can have this option selected where it says notify your network. So if I upload any new information or if I make changes to my profile, it can send that notification to the feeds of everyone in my network. And if I don't, let's say, for example, I'm correcting a typo on my profile, or if I'm just updating my resume or CV and I'm not on the market, then I can select no, and then it won't notify everybody through their feed. So again, being intentional about the way that you are navigating and managing that profile. Under your education and experience sections, it's really critical that you're connecting to your companies. Most companies have some sort of a LinkedIn profile. You will be able to connect to your company, and you'll know that you're connected because their logo will be connected to your own profile. So what happens here, this is my previous position as account executive at an agency in Atlanta, Georgia. If you were to go to this section of my profile and click that logo, it would take you through to that company's profile page. So you could learn more about the specific company that I worked for. You should also highlight your accomplishments. And remember, don't make this a regurgitation of your resume, right? So this should highlight key and critical accomplishments that you have. Also highlight recommendations. So the rule of thumb is that for any listing that you have under either education or experience, you should have at least 2 different recommendations. So you can request recommendations through LinkedIn from people. You can also edit those recommendations and decide whether or not they they are visible on your profile. And also send out recommendations for people. These are not extensive recommendation letters. These are sort of brief snippets where people are testifying to your own work skills and experience. So here I have previous client and a previous coworker who have recommended me from working in the advertising industry. Finally, under the section, you can add media if possible. If I were still in the advertising industry, I might connect, for example, to a YouTube video of one of my commercial campaigns. Under the skills and endorsement section, you can have up to 50 skills listed, and you can decide what those skills are. The skills that are endorsed the most populate to the top. So because my career in advertising was longer than my career in academics thus far, you'll see that at the top of my skills, I have advertising, marketing, strategic communication. As people endorse me for skills, they will again rise to the top. And so the longer I stay in academia, my hope is that skills like qualitative research, as well as university teaching, would become endorsed, and then they would populate. But again, this is based on your experience, and this is something that recruiters look at because this is not something you exclusively control. So people are vouching for you, they're vouching for those skills. You can ask your connections to endorse those skills. So I'll ask the 22 of you, if you connect with me on LinkedIn, please look for those academic skill sets and boost those to the top for me. You'll see things like public speaking are up there, time management. I really would like the qualitative research, university teaching, higher education to be closer to the top. And with time, eventually they will. You can also endorse the skills of other people. So here, when you log in, LinkedIn will prompt you to endorse people's skill sets by asking, does this candidate have these skills or expertise? If you're comfortable endorsing them with those skills, you can just hit endorse. If you're not, you can hit the X box next to that particular skill. And you can also type in another skill if you know that this individual has a skill that's not listed. You can also skip this function entirely if you're uncomfortable endorsing a person for a skill. In addition, you also have the option to connect with a particular company. So this is a former student of mine, Stephen Harris, and he now works for Conway in the KC area. And so if I were interested in that particular employer as a company, then I could follow that company and be given their highlights or updates or in my own newsfeed within LinkedIn. Something that can be really helpful is, particularly if you're on the job search, is by following different organizations. So you can follow schools as well as companies, and you will learn about different highlights that happenings are going on at a particular organization. So here I've followed a number of different schools. When I was on the job market, I interviewed or applied for a lot of jobs in different universities. I also have followed different previous clients that I've had and different companies that I've worked for. And then I've connected with companies that are just in the local area that I know sort of have a large network. So for example, Barkley or Blacktop Creative. Those are two advertising agencies in the area that I've made connections with and honestly send students to for internships. And so this is just a way to sort of be in the know with local organizations or organizations that you're interested in. There are a number of different ways to grow your profile with LinkedIn. So you can do that by accepting invitations and inviting people to connect. LinkedIn will also search your email account. So it will go through your connections or contacts and then find ones that have a LinkedIn profile. So you can allow that to do that with your Hotmail, Gmail, Outlook, or Yahoo Mail, or AOL if you still have that. And it will search and then connect you with people who are already part of those contacts. It'll also suggest people that you may know because you have common connections. So you'll see here, it's suggesting Maureen Kinney. It says that we have 2 contacts. I used to work with Maureen's mother in advertising. And so it's connecting us on LinkedIn. And so I can click connect. If you click connect, it sends a default message that says, hi, I would like to add you to my network. If you go to the particular profile, so in this example, if I went to Maureen's profile, I could write a more personal message and say, hey, Maureen, it's great to see you on LinkedIn. Tell your mom I said hi. I'd love to connect with you. And so you're more likely to get a response and a connection by developing that personal message than you are by hitting connect. But I've definitely had both work for me. The final thing that I'll suggest is to join LinkedIn groups. So LinkedIn has 1.2 million groups, and they are based on a number of different categories. So some of them can be connected to your industry or occupation. They have others specific to local networking. They also have alumni groups for universities that you've graduated from. And then they have aspirational groups. So for example, let's say you want to learn Java, which is a software coding system, then you could join that group and learn, watch particular webinars. You could learn training sessions by joining the group on LinkedIn. People use groups to find jobs, find networking opportunities, to inform and educate themselves. You can post articles, you can post blog posts, you can share all types of information. You can also sort of encourage, discuss, and ask for help. I see we have a question in the Q&A. What if you get a request to connect with someone, but you don't know them or have any mutual connections? So LinkedIn is pretty good about vetting connections. So usually if someone's connected to you, it's because they are 1, 2, or 3 degrees removed from your own profile. But it has happened before where I've been connected with someone who I have no idea who they are. And so you can decide to ignore that person, and LinkedIn does not show that you've ignored the request. If it's someone that you might be interested in connecting with, so for example, a number of academics in other institutions have found me and connected, and we've had great conversations or exchanged our research online. And so you can decide at what point if you'd like to accept those connections, or if you'd like to accept it now and decline it later. You can always sever a connection if you realize that someone's trying to, for example, solicit you for a product. That would be an example of a time when I've definitely cut someone out of my network. Great question. Okay, hold on, I gotta go back. All right, so there are 7 ways that you can maximize your LinkedIn presence. Number 1 is to accept invitations and extend invitations, right? So when you see people connecting with you or reaching out to you, if you feel comfortable with that, definitely accept it. And then extend invitations to people in your network or people who are connections of your other connections. 2, respond to messages and maintain a clean inbox. So my LinkedIn inbox is not something that I visit regularly, but I do have a notification system set up with my work email. So when someone sends me a LinkedIn message, I get an email in my work account that prompts me to check it. That way I don't have multiple inboxes that I'm checking. But I'm also aware when I have professional connections that are reaching out to me. Number 3, endorse your connections and accept endorsements. So again, this has to do with the skills profile on your LinkedIn presence. So when people endorse you for skills, sometimes, especially if it's a skill I'm interested in, I say a quick thank you, and then I go to their profile and endorse them for a skill that I know they have. It has happened before where people endorse me for skills that I don't think I have. And so in that case, you can go through and remove that skill from your profile. Number 4, you can track endorsements and add a top strengths to your summary. So as you earn endorsements and they populate to the top of that list, then you can go to your strength summary and say that these are your top 5 skills, and have a bulleted list so that people know that this is what other people have vouched for in terms of your own skill set and expertise. Number 5, scroll through posts on your homepage feed and engage at your discretion. So I'm part of a lot of different groups, and various thought leaders in those groups will post thought-provoking articles. And as I see fit, I'll sort of comment on those or engage in professional discussion online. You can also share your own article, quote, you can add a question, you can post. So for example, I advertise this Link and Learn on my own LinkedIn page. And so these are ways that you can connect with the LinkedIn community. And then finally, review your own profile to see if updates are needed. So I try to update my LinkedIn profile about every 6 months, so twice a year, just to make sure that if there are any sort of critical or key changes that people want to be aware of, that they have access to that on my LinkedIn profile. You don't want your LinkedIn profile to become defunct or outdated. It's important that it stays up to date. So just to review, today we talked about what networking is, both internally and externally. We talked about Granovetter's theory, the strength of weak ties. We also looked at interpersonal face-to-face social networking, as well as networking online, and then a number of different resources for networking. If you're interested in learning more, we have a number of different Link and Learns coming up. So next month, I'm presenting on communicating for inclusion. These are strategies for engaging people across boundaries of place and culture. It's a topic that's near and dear to my heart. In September, my colleague, Dr. Angie Pastoric, will present on the performance review, giving and receiving meaningful and effective feedback, which is something I know that we all have experienced in our lifetimes. And then in October, we'll talk about managing change through communication strategy, stakeholders, methods, and message. So we'd love for you to join us for those future Lincoln Learns. Please help us spread the word. So I'll be promoting it on my own LinkedIn profile. If you all would connect with me and help share that way as well. We would like to share with you a little bit of detail about our graduate certificate in professional workplace communication. So this is a 4-course graduate certificate. It's 12 credit hours, and it can be completed in approximately a year. We have 2 core courses, one which is being offered this summer and will be offered in the fall, which is applied organizational communication. We also have writing and speaking for decision makers. And then there are 2 elective courses that you can select. So here are a sampling of courses that have been offered recently. So one that I taught in the spring was identity and stigma in organizations. I'm teaching an organizational culture class this fall. And also my colleague, Dr. Pastoric, is teaching about organizational socialization. And my colleague, Dr. Ford, is teaching about health communication in health organizations. So it's a joint appointment at the KU Med Center. We'd like to highlight for you the KU Comms difference. All of our faculty have both corporate, nonprofit, or entrepreneurial experience and a doctorate in organizational communication. So you're getting this really nice graduate level classmates at the Edwards campus are upwardly mobile, mid-career professionals from top employers across the KC metro area. We'd love for you to visit us online and learn more about future Lincoln Learns. Here, if you visit edwardscampus.ku.edu, you can see Lincoln Learns listed, and we have a whole new schedule starting in January. So we'd love for you to join us in future sessions. If you have questions, please contact us on Facebook or through the chat session. We'll stay online a little longer. And we'd love for you to like us on Facebook, right? So we have lots of different news that we share. So now we're sending out the poll questions just to learn a little bit more about your experience today. If you have any other questions, you can use the Q&A or chat function. Oh, I see one. Oh. Oh, yeah, I can see that. So we got a question about sharing the presentation. We can definitely do that. We also put a video of the presentations up on our website. So the edwardscampus.ku.edu/link-and-learn. On that website, we post the previous videos for Lincoln Learns, and we'll be posting this one as well. We're also hosting this same Lincoln Learn on the 20th of July, I think, or maybe it's the 21st, but it'll be a Thursday, and that'll be at 11 a.m. So I'll be posting that as well. I'm going to share with you the website. So if you see here, someone had asked about the resource, linkedwise.com. So Wiser You. So this is where she is on LinkedIn. This is the career coach, Kathy Bernard, that I shared with you. And I just Googled it and was able to find her. So thanks, everybody. That's all we have for you today, but we'd be happy to stick around and chat if people have other questions.